Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at the full set reveal for Ruler of the Black Flame. So basically, for those of you who don't know how Japanese sets work, this is going to be the next small set to release in Japan. And usually what happens is a bunch of these smaller sets make up one bigger English set for the West, so in our case, Obsidian Flames. But unlike Paldea Evolved, which was made up of around 3 small sets, Obsidian Flames is only going to be made up of one of these sets, which is this one. And then what's basically going to happen is it's going to be a bit of a smaller set, I would imagine, but it is going to feature a lot of excess cards from other products and promos from Japan. So the EX starter decks that were revealed a little while back, which, the likes of Cafable EX are kind of cool, but most of them are pretty bad, to be honest. I think there is a Greninja EX that's kind of alright, but that's being cut from Obsidian Flames anyway. We have confirmation of that. So yeah, it's a little bit topsy-turvy. There is less cards to put in the main set, but this is the main set for Obsidian Flames. So just getting into the review here, we have a Oddish line, Oddish Gloom Blossom. Blossom, unfortunately, isn't super great, although I do have to say the artwork for Blossom is frankly amazing. But it does have the attack Powerful Dance, 1 grass energy, flip a coin for each energy attached to Pokemon, does 90 for each heads. Pretty bad. We've seen this kind of attack before. There was a Colossal in the Sword and Shield era that had a similar kind of attack. This admittedly does have Reverse Energy and Charm, which is kind of cool, but honestly, this card isn't super great. There is a Gloom and a Vileplume that are coming out in 151 that could potentially accelerate energy cards from the top of your deck, which sounds kind of good in theory, but then of course you would have to, like Rare Candy the first Blossom, then evolve up to the Gloom on the second turn for the, the next Oddish, I guess. I did kind of say those cards were pretty bad in my initial review, and I did get some backlash for that. Basically, why I do that, why I'm so critical all the time, is I really don't want to get in the habit of becoming another YouTuber that really just oversells bad cards. Because sometimes you will watch YouTube videos and even top players look at a card and they're like, "Oh guys, this is so cool, it's so good," and all the rest of it. And it's really just not. And I would like to be wrong about a lot of these cards, but especially with cards like the Gloom and the Vileplume from 151, I really don't think they're that great. If this deck ends up being really fun, really cool, that's great. I'm all for new rogue decks, but honestly, I don't think this card is super great. And 130 HP, it's not bulky at all. It's pretty bad. So next up, we have a Scyther. So we are getting a Scizor, that's metal types. That's why it's on its own here. We do have a Shuckle, which is kind of just bad, actually. Any GLC? I guess Blossom, actually, that's something worth noting, is you could pair it up with the Jungle Totem Venusaur, so maybe there's some GLC synergy there. Scyther, Shuckle, nothing for GLC here. We do see a Combi. Now, there is a Vespiquen EX in the set, as you can probably tell by the thumbnail of this video, hopefully. But Vespiquen is a Psychic type that uses Grass Energy because it's a Terra type, so yeah, that's a little bit awkward, but Combi here is, pretty bland. 50 HP as well is pretty bad. There is some other Combis, I think there's one from Astral Radiance that searches your deck for an item, which is a lot better, so something worth bearing in mind. We do have our first other evolution line, though. We have a Phantom and Trevenant, always a fan of new Trevenant cards. The ability Forest Spirit's kind of cool. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, you put 1 damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup, which I believe is another way of saying just in between turns, which is kind of a cool ability. It does have synergy with the Vespiquen EX that we'll eventually see, but unfortunately, I don't think this ability is super cool. It does kind of rely on it being in the active spot, for a decent amount of time to rack up the damage. It could kind of be comboed with stuff like Hisuian Samurott and Meowscarada, but also not really, because you'd have to leave Trevenant in the active for at least 1 turn for it to really have much of a difference with the damage counters, and then Trevenant has to survive to get more than 1 damage counter, so all seems a bit convoluted. There is a fun Trevenant from Silver Tempest, I think, that can deny prize cards against Vs, but honestly, nothing super crazy. Lockup can be used for a reverse energy, which is good to know, but honestly, I don't think this Trevenant is super great. Next up, though, we have a Capsicid line. Now, this one was revealed the other day, so don't really have to spend that long on it, but the Scovalion can be both grass and fire type, but unfortunately is only doing 110 damage, which is kind of bad. So even if you're hitting weakness on something, basically there's no reason kind of not just to play Satitan. You could get Defiant Band or something involved, and then you'd be doing more damage than Satitan. But honestly, Satitan and a bunch of other Zork attackers just seem like better Pokemon, to be honest, than this Scovalion. Next up, though, is we have a Charmander Charmeleon. Unfortunately, unlike the God of War evolution lines, they're not really offering anything here, so Stage 1 basics, pretty bad. Got a Vulpix, which is okay, I guess. Vulpix is fine. We do have a Ninetales here, which is kind of cool. Allows you to place 9 damage counters one of your opponent's Pokemon, which is honestly pretty decent spread, because it obviously can't be blocked by Manaphy, which is kind of cool. And during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack, which is kind of irrelevant because, Ninetales only has 120 HP, so getting knocked out almost immediately. Could be really cool in GLC, honestly. I could see this like having some decent implications there, or applications rather. Is it pretty good? Not really in standard, to be honest. Seems a bit weak. Not much else to say. You could put this in Zoroark box, I guess, but yeah, there's probably better options. There is the Ninetales EX, at least from 151, that's also just kind of bad, but it's still there if you really want to pay it. So at least there's some sort of Ninetales cards that are kind of cool, but yeah, nothing too crazy there. Next up, we have this Entei, which is very reminiscent of some of the older Enteis that we've seen in the past. Has the ability Pressure, it says it takes 20 less damage from attacks, only has 130 HP, so unless you start getting like Bravery Charm involved, this ability really won't matter all too much. Then it has the attack Blaze Ball. They have 3 colors, does 50 damage, and then 20 more for each Fire Energy attaches Pokemon. So a super low multiplier, this is actually 60 times as written on the card, so Pokebee just kind of mistranslated that a little bit, but nothing to worry about. So yeah, it's not really the biggest multiplier in the world. You'd much rather this with 60 plus 30. It would, of course, be rivaling God of War, which is a stage 2 at that point. But honestly, this basic just seems kind of underwhelming. Of course, in something like GLC, where stuff like Welder exists, and I forget what the name is. Oh yeah, Embor that can accelerate Fire Energy as many as you want. Then, of course, like Entei is a lot better and stuff like GLC. And I guess that's, something worth bearing in mind for these cards. But honestly, I don't think this card will be, it's not going to be a super great deck in standard, basically. There is a Thundurus and a Landorus, I believe, to look at later on, or at least a Thundurus, or a Tornadus, I should say. So there is, some cool Pokemon that are like mythical legendary in this set, which is kind of cool as well. But honestly, I don't think this Entei will be seeing a whole ton of play. Next up is we have a Darumaka line, which I don't actually remember the last time we saw these. Like, there was a Galarian Darmanitan in the Sword and Shield era, but I don't remember when the last time we had a Fire-type version of this card was. But yeah, pretty cool Pokemon. Unfortunately, nothing too crazy. Stuff's damaged, does 60 more. We've seen these kind of attacks before. They're just nothing too great, unfortunately. Next up, we have Heatmore. Does 30 damage, and then 30 more for each energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon. So, opponent's active, rather. So, if they have at least 3 energy, you're doing what, like 120 for 2 energy? It's just nothing great, honestly. I'm struggling not to laugh here, but yeah, Heatmore, nothing great. Maybe in GLC again, but really not good enough for standard. We've got an Ice Q EX, which is a Terra type, which is kind of cool. Has the attack for 3 water energy. So this is like a nice fire type tech option in a Baxcalibur deck, theoretically. Does 160 damage, and you discard an energy from Ice Q, which is fine, because you already have synergy, hopefully, with, well, maybe not Magma Basin, but, like superior energy retrieval in Baxcalibur, so that's kind of cool. Then the defending Pokemon can't attack during your opponent's next turn. Not a super great attack, honestly, because your opponent could just switch out, but having said that, 160 is a lot. It is nearly two-shotting everything in the game, so honestly, not the worst card ever. 210 is a bit fragile. I know, like, 210 seems like an awful lot of HP, but it's kind of not at the same time. So, yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about this card, to be honest. Maybe it has some like control implications, like Ice Cube, Baxcalibur could like be its own deck or something. But I don't think this card is super strong. But it's not like the worst piece of junk either. So this is like a 3 out of 5 for me personally. But yeah, I'll have to see if Ice Cube does anything. Next up, we have Sharpedo, which has an Aqua Impact attack, which definitely feels like a reference to a Sun and Moon Sharpedo. Unfortunately, this one is just super, super bad. Like, I think that one even had a higher modifier than this one. This one does 10 damage and 30 more for each colors in your opponent's active retreat cost. Even if they have, like, a retreat cost of 3 on an EX, you're still only doing 100 damage, which for 1 energy is still really bad. So, unfortunately, rather, Sharpedo is just not going to be doing anything. We have a Palpitoad Seismitoad line. Gone over days of a competitive Seismitoad EX, but here we go. Seismitoad with the ability Quaking Area. We've seen this kind of ability before. It is kind of annoying against a stage 2, and this one does only require 2 energy, which means we can get Raihan involved, which is always nice. Echoed Voice does 120 damage, and then during your next turn it does 100 more. So it's like a 2-hit KO style move, and then theoretically if you KO something with Echoed Voice, you could then do a lot more damage to the next Pokemon. So there is some nice implications here. It seems like a very fun stage 2 to mess around with. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, it will just be that. There's nothing like competitive really about this card. The ability is obviously extremely annoying against certain decks, but with a lot of Chen Pao and a lot of Gardevoir around, yeah, the ability isn't super great, but, you know, still a fun stage 2 to mess around with nonetheless. Next up, we have a Beartic, which, yeah, rip Beartic fans, never going to get a good card, unfortunately. We have Cryogonal, which honestly might be a contender for one of the worst cards that I've seen in a while. Like, right, just hear me out here. One colorless energy, fast freeze, does 30 damage, and if you go second, and it's your first turn, so only if you go second if it's your first turn, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. So after that turn, this card is just 30 damage for 1 energy. It's super bad. Now, you could make the argument that in like a Ditto control deck, maybe this could see play because it has value on the first turn going second. But honestly, if that's all it's really doing, and then it's just sitting around doing nothing for the rest of the game, especially when your opponent could just evolve or switch out on the second turn of the game, this Cryogonal honestly seems really bad. It's a bit of a shame because there's often been really cool Cryogonals in the past, but yeah, this one's really not doing it for me, sadly, so bit of a rip. We also have a Finzion that's really strong, actually. Brave Evolution allows you to switch when you're benched, which is important for the Palafin. Then it says search your deck for a Palafin and evolve it. So pretty strong attack, honestly. Switching to the bench is really nice because you can put up like a wall Pokemon like Mimikyu or something. So honestly, a really strong attack for an evolving basic to have. Just a bit of a shame that not more evolving basics have these attacks. On the other end of the spectrum, though, there is a Finzion with 90 HP, which is a sizable boost in hit points. You know, it's a bit of a leap up from 50, but yeah, obviously Brave Evolution is definitely the best Finzion to have. But then the Palafin, which was revealed as a previous promo ages ago. If you don't know what this card does, though, and you obviously don't want to go back and watch that video, this Palafin has 2 attacks, Jet Punch, reminiscent of the Buzzwole GX. Okay attack, but not really that good because it's on a stage 1. And then the attack Justice Kick does 210 for 2 water energy, and if it didn't move from the bench to active, its attack does nothing. So could still be a pretty solid attack, honestly, but for 2 water energy does mean you have to get Raihan involved, EXP share, that kind of thing. It'll be very awkward to play this. At least, you have one setup because, you just Finzion switch to the bench. You could even pick out one of like the baby Pokemon like this Cleffa that we're about to have a look at here. So honestly, I don't think this card is super bad. But 210 really isn't the number it used to be, and you're not really carrying anything, so it's kind of awkward to get going, awkward setup as well. So yeah, a bit unfortunate, but I don't think this card is super great. Next up, though, I guess we might as well just move along some of these because we'll have to look them eventually. If it wants to load, please load. Thank you. We've got Cleffa with 30 HP, so ultra squishy against something like Lost Zone, but does have free retreat, which is nice. And it does have the attack Grasping Draw that says draw cards until you have 7 in your hand, which is a really nice attack. Unfortunately, you're not, proof to Iono, which is a bit of a shame. Would have been nice to have some of the old baby effects on these cards. That could have been cool to have, but unfortunately, whatever, it's a Cleffa. It's a kind of a cool attack. It is for 0 energy, which is always nice to see. I'm glad when Pokemon do this sort of thing because it means they can be put into more decks. I do like that. But honestly, is this Cleffa super cool? It might be good in the future, right? Because people keep saying, like, if we ever get to a point in the format where things really slow down and it's just like stage 2s that are really popular, I don't think that's going to be the case as of right now. Of course, we're still several sets away from the next rotation, so we don't know what they're going to print. But honestly, this Cleffa would be pretty good in a stage 2 deck if you just need more time to set up. And it does have free retreat, so you can easily pivot, and it means you can run different stadiums other than Beach Court, which is always nice. So kind of a cool card, honestly. I will be putting this in several of my decks, but is it super competitive? Probably not, but definitely worth, having 1 or 2 copies of. But oh yeah, I looked at that Cleffa card and then I realized that they're not listed in the order of English card revealed. So yeah, the Cleffa will be a premiere for later, I guess. But yeah, we've got Tyranitar EX over here. 340 HP, so he is a bulky boy. He is a Terra type though, so he is lightning using fighting energy, which is kind of awkward because, there is Tyranitars that exist, but all of them use dark energy in standard, so it's kind of unfortunate. But it does have the attack Mountain Grumble that does 120, and you discard the top 2 cards of your deck. Kind of bad, to be honest. 120 isn't a lot of damage. Now you could get like Cheryl involved, I guess, because 340 is a lot. But, we've kind of theorized about doing that in the past. It hasn't really worked out so much, so I don't really remain optimistic that Cheryl and Stage 2s are meant to be played together. Could it be cool, though? Maybe, something rogue here. Tall Rampage, though, 150, and if any of your benched have any damage, does 100 more. So you could in theory do 250, which is honestly really solid, especially when you start getting other modifiers involved. Needing other modifiers, though, and a special condition, and 2 energy on a Stage 2 seems kind of bad, to be honest. Seems kind of slow, I guess. Like, it's definitely not bad when it gets set up, obviously, but to get there to that point, it's going to be a bit awkward. Now, there is a Dodrio. Funnily enough, I know Dodrio of all Pokemon. There is a Dodrio in 151 that says you can place a damage counter on it to draw a card. So maybe there's something there, You could also pair this up with, like, Gape Bog. There's also, like, the Cleffa we just looked at if you need more time. So maybe this Tyranitar is better than I think it is. I've definitely seen some people that think this card is pretty good. So, maybe it's great. I don't know. I've not tested this card yet. It's one of the few Stage 2s I've kind of been ignoring. So maybe it's better than I think it is. But honestly, not too sure about Tyranitar. Not too sure how to feel about it. Next up, though, is we have a Electros line, which is just pure bulk. We do have a Thundurus, which is kind of cool, though. Has the ability Bad Weather that says, as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon by your opponent's attacks. So where have we seen this ability before? Oh yes, Manaphy. Except Manaphy works from the bench. So why would we ever play Thundurus just for this ability? We'd obviously don't play it for the ability, we play it for the attack. Of course, when Manaphy eventually rotates, when Brilliant Stars rotates along with Arceus, that would be quite a big loss actually for the set. But, when that set rotates, we will be lacking a bench barrier. So is this Pokemon's answer to the next Manaphy? Seems a bit wild if it is, because of course people are not just going to play Thundurus for bench protection. It is here for the attack. So Gigantopult does 140 for 2 lightning energy. Like, can you imagine how wild this would be in like the Sun and Moon era with Electro Power and stuff? But yeah, 140, honestly a lot of damage, but it does do 90 to itself. So maybe like in GLC this has decent applications, because of course 140 is just so much damage. It's also kind of bulky, so if you could heal it up. There's also like the Protection Cube in Expanded that prevents all damage that you would do to yourself. So if you put a Protection Cube on here, then you're not doing the 90, which is kind of cool. Although that does mean you're not doing stuff like Fighting Freebout, which is a bit annoying. But honestly, I don't think this card is that bad. Could definitely see playing GLC. Seems pretty solid. In Standard, maybe an okay single prize attacker in Lightning decks, but you do have the Regieleki that's pretty strong anyway, but could be a nice option. So that's always cool to see. We do have a Toxtricity, which is kind of cool. 50 damage, then 30 more for each different type on your bench. Unfortunately, it does get super awkward though, because the attack cost isn't even for 2 colors. It's 1 lightning and a colorless, which is just super annoying. So we either have to get reverse energy involved, or, like lightning plus Raihan and try and do that every turn or something. And, we can get different types of Pokemon in play. We could get like Bibarel to draw cards. We get the Cleffa, as we mentioned earlier. There's like some decent choices here, but your damage output is also like super low. If this was 50 plus 40 more, I could probably get a bit more on board with this card, but because it's just such a low modifier for a single prizer, then yeah, unfortunately I don't see this card being super great. We do see a Tadbulb line. Tadbulb can accelerate lightning energy to itself, which I guess is kind of cool. This other Tadbulb is just kind of here, I guess. We've got a Bellibolt with the ability Insulator, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by lightning Pokemon. So that's kind of cool. It does mean Zoroark has a choice to switch into a lightning type just to wall out a certain deck. So, if we ever get some lightning types that are super busted, then Zoroark has that option, which is kind of cool. As for the attack Thunder Edge, it's pretty bad. 100 damage for 3 energy, goes through effects, but still pretty bad. We did look at the Cleffa earlier, but if you've been skipping around the video and you just want my thoughts on this, I think it's pretty solid. Would recommend picking up a 1 copy of this at least, but honestly, nothing too crazy as of right now. Then we've got a Togepi, which is kind of annoying for a control deck. Togetic, which is each player draws 3 cards. I guess like a self-mill or something, a bit weird. But anyway, we've got Togekiss, which has the ability Precious Gift. Once in your turn, you may draw cards until you have 8 cards in your hand, which honestly seems kind of decent. It's okay, to be honest. Unfortunately, you will be Ionode sometimes, which is annoying. The opponent won't be able to do that every turn, of course, which is something people often forget when looking at cards like these. But if your strategy does rely on not being Ionode, then Yeah, it kind of gets a bit awkward at that point. It's also stage 2, which is ultra annoying. Now, I have seen some people, aka 10 types, did mention, I think, that there is a Togepi and Togetic from like Astral Radiance, I believe, that heal a little bit of damage when you evolve them or put them onto the bench, respectively. So there is like at least a little bit of synergy here. So maybe you play like a split of this evolution line. Is it enough to be, warrant playing this? Maybe honestly in some kind of tanky stall deck like Gudra or Blissey, there's like potential for this card, but other than that, I think it's kind of bad. There's also like the argument this is kind of better than Radiant Venusaur because although it's not a basic, at least with Radiant Venusaur, it means that you could play a different Radiant Pokemon in that specific deck. So I know that's like a very niche detailed thing to bring up there, but it does mean this Togekiss is not complete bulk. It is kind of interesting, and I think it's also a previous promo, which is kind of cool. So yeah, Togekiss also has free retreat and attack isn't terrible. So maybe I'm overselling this Togekiss, but honestly, it doesn't seem that bad. Got an Espeon here, which is I think it says one. It's kind of meh. Yeah, 30 damage, 10 more of each damage counter on your opponent's active. Kind of generic. Seen this sort of attacks before. It's definitely a finisher move. Maybe if you're playing a deck that doesn't hit a lot of damage, you can then hit into something that's psychic weak, but it's not really a lot of demand for that. And Zarok decks typically have enough attackers right now as is, so I don't think we need something like Espeon around, but still worth considering, I guess. Got Lunatone, which has Lunaton, which has the ability New Moon. I do apologize for that. Which says if you have any Solar Rock in play, prevent all effects of your opponent's stadium cards done to your Pokemon, which is kind of cool. It does like turn off Path to the Peak. Also have to give a shout out to this absolutely amazing artwork. It's very cool. Is the ability that great? I mean, you do have to have like one of each of these in play, which seems kind of bad. Now, Solar Rock does have a useful attack call for family, so like maybe I could see maybe like a 1/1 of these in the classic Solar Rock Lunatone deck. Maybe seems kind of bad. There isn't like too many stadiums that affect you aside from Path to the Peak, so I don't know. It seems like a bit much, really, to pull off. Also, I've like kind of forgotten about GLC when talking about some of these other cards, but yeah, Toxtricity not really good for GLC. Bellybolt is like whatever in GLC. Cleffa pretty solid psychic inclusion, and Togekiss is I guess pretty solid in GLC actually. It's nice draw power, but we do have Curler and Gardevoir, so there's some nice options, I guess. But yeah, the Solar Rock and Lunatone, nothing too crazy, I don't think. Got a Baltoy and a Claydol, which is super interesting, to be honest. Has the attack Kaboom Doll, which says put damage counters on your opponent's active until it has remaining HP of 10. So we usually see these kind of attacks for 3 Colorless Energy, so this is a massive step up from that. But this Pokemon just KOs itself. So it doesn't strictly KO itself, it does 120 to itself. So it does mean that if you involve like HP modifiers, you could in theory tank a hit. But honestly, I don't think this Claydol is super great. Now, in theory, you could maybe just use his attack and then switch into something like a Mimikyu, hope your opponent can't do anything. There'd be like some fun decks to try out with this. You could even get like Alakazam EX involved for some bench shenanigans. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this card, but I don't think it's, super competitive or anything, just a really fun card. Then we finally get to like the big talking point of the set, really, Vespiquen EX. So it is unfortunately another psychic type, which I know is kind of generic, but it does use grass energy, so that's kind of cool at least. Recovery Pheromones heals 60 damage to one of your Pokemon. Honestly, not the worst attack in the world, especially not if you go for some sort of tanking deck, maybe with Slowking, it's kind of cool. And then Phantom Queen does 200 damage for 3 grass energy, so super expensive, but we can use Charm or Gardenia, at least for, Charm to Combi, and then Gardenia for Vespiquen if we need. Does 200 damage, and then put 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon that have any damage counters on it. So I have to wonder if Trevenant was maybe mistranslated. Could Trevenant have meant all of your opponent's Pokemon? I really hope that's the case. If not, this card just seems kind of bad. Now, there is a Weezing. Yep, there is a Weezing. That does 50 damage and then 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon in 1/5/1. So maybe that Weezing is a good partner for this. Maybe. Seems like a lot of work if you have to get more than one stage 1 involved, though. So honestly, unless we get like a supporter that is a bit like Roxy, where you discard Pokemon and you like sprinkle a bit of damage around, I don't think this card is going to be super cool. Definitely want to consider for the future, and because I'm such a big fan of Vespiquen, and honestly, I think this artwork is kind of sick actually for a Terra type. I'll definitely be trying this out on the channel at some point, hopefully, but honestly, not like the best EX in the world by a long shot. Next up, though, is we have a new Graveyard. honestly, like most of these graveyards will not see play because of the cool graveyard from Scotland Via base set, which is pretty good. Then we have a Houndstone, which unfortunately is just kind of bad, 200 damage. It's kind of cool when they branch out and do these like interesting effects and involve different prize cards and stuff, but yeah, Struggle to Death, definitely not going to be translated as that in the English release, but unfortunately nothing too crazy there. We have a Larvitar Pupitar to serve that Chinatar that we reviewed earlier. We have a Nose Pass, which will evolve into I believe it's a Probopass or something later on for Metal types. Then we have like what I believe is apparently like the first English Bonsai card in like 16 years or something daft. It's like, or it's one of only 2 English Bonsai cards in so long. So yeah, it's been ages since we've seen Bonsai in the TCG. So I assume this means that in the next like smaller Japanese set, we'll see other baby Pokemon like Magby and stuff, which would be cool. But this one does Beep Beep Cry, 10 damage for no energy, which is kind of cool. And your opponent's active is now confused, and it also has free retreat. So this is kind of like a nice bit of a troll deck inclusion for meme decks and stuff. Maybe could also be kind of cool in control decks. You know, could do a bit of confusion, a bit annoying. Is it super great though? Honestly, I think Clefairy is just a bit better, and expanded you also have just better options for free baby attackers and stuff. So honestly, I don't think Bonsai is super cool in standard, but it could be a bit annoying, so that's always nice to see. Stonefisk is... it's pretty bad. Let's just move on. Okay, Stunfisk is like, it's kind of cool for GLC and stuff, but honestly, I don't think Stunfisk is wild, so I know I've kind of like I randomly stopped talking about GLC again, but yeah. Stunfisk, nothing too great, don't think it's that bad. Then we have Diggersby, which kind of generic, bland bulk. We have a Lycanroc, which again, some amazing artwork in this set, honestly, it's really cool. Finishing Fan does 90 damage, and if your opponent's active has no damage counters on it, before this attack does damage, this attack does nothing, so it's kind of like this 2-hit KO move, which is kind of annoying because you'd rather just evolve up on the second turn of the game and KO like an evolving basic. There is, however, a Lycanroc EX, which is cool to remember, so you know, maybe we could get that involved and go for like a 2-hit KO, but honestly, nothing too crazy here, but at least it's kind of cool. There's also like a single prize one from Crown Zenith, so honestly, I kind of like this card. It's pretty cool, but again, nothing too crazy. We have a Glimmet. Important worth mentioning that we do have important fact, I guess, is that we do have a Glimmet with Ascension from Paldea Evolved, so that's more important. Glimmora EX, I've talked about this card like 3 times already, but basically, if you really want a summary, like a very brief summary, because that's what it will be for this, I think this card is kind of cool. I don't think it's insane, but because we have a Glimmet with Ascension, then I think it's a lot better than, you know, just kind of bad. It's a bit awkward because it's a stage 1. It's not doing a whole ton of damage, but at the same time, poison is nice. So I don't think this card is terrible. I just don't think it's, you know, busted anyway. Charizard EX, similarly, I've talked about this card multiple times already, and I'm sure a lot of other people have as well that you've seen on YouTube, so I will not spend that long on this card. But I really do think this card is really strong. Is it broken like God of War? Probably not, to be honest, but I do think it is a good card, and it will make for a very solid tier 2 deck, if not tier 1. So that's my honest thoughts on this Charizard. Next up, though, is we have Paldean Whooper, which is... I mean, Paldean Whoopers, guys, they're cute, but they're not great. Paldean Quagsire. I said Clodsire there. Why is it Quagsire? Is that what they're going for here? It's not a great joke, but yeah, whatever. Venoshock, 80 damage. Your opponent's active is poison. This attack is 120 more, so like 200. Yeah. You know, like the problem with all these stage 1s doing less damage is the fact that Titan does like 220 for 3 for reverse energy, basically. So there's no reason, unfortunately, to play these guys. Like, yeah, it's a dark type attacker, I guess, in Zoroark, but yeah, it's not great. Now, there is a Paldean Quagsire EX from Paldea Evolved, which is kind of cool. So I guess there's like some synergy there, but honestly, I don't think this card is super great. Next up, we have Umbreon, which has a 50 snipe and not much else going for it apart from some amazing artwork. We have a Houndour, which is actually kind of cool. Allows you to search your deck for an energy, attach it to each of your bench Houndour, which is, you know, it's a nice attack for evolving basic to have. Unfortunately, the Houndoom is pretty bad, but there is a Houndoom EX that's, you know, I'm not going to lie to you guys, it is pretty bad as well if you haven't seen it, but yeah, Houndoom EX kind of bad, but at the same time, you know, at least we have some nice synergy, I guess, with single prize and the basic Houndour, so that's always nice. Absol EX, seen this card multiple times as well, but unfortunately, it's just not super great. I think the best application for this card is definitely in some kind of control deck with that first attack future sight, but unfortunately it's just not a great card. We have a Darkrai, which is a pretty cool Pokemon, but unfortunately its attacks aren't super great. We do have an Inkay, which is okay, a Malamar, which just kind of allows you to look at top card of your opponent's deck and then your deck, which is okay, but it's not really like super control focused. Like usually with control, you want to be discarding cards or manipulating what they draw. This just kind of allows you to look at the top card of their deck, and it's not like super great. So yeah, I don't think this Malamar is super great. If you're like a massive control fan, do you think this card is pretty good? But unfortunately, I don't think this card is great, at least from a casual standard player, really. And the Scizor, 10 damage, 50 for each opponent's Pokemon playing ability. So this, again, was another card that was revealed quite early on. Not super great, to be honest. There is like a Flapple that does a similar thing in Standards. That's kind of lame to see, Pokemon just kind of recycling some ideas there. But this does do 10 more damage than Flapple, which is kind of cool, at the expense of, not being a 90 HP Pokemon, so there's no level ball. Also requiring a metal instead of a color, so kind of annoying, honestly, in that sense. Maybe we'll get a Scizor EX, so that's kind of cool if there's, the option to pair them up together. But honestly, I don't think the Scizor is super great, but maybe, a good option against Gem Power Excalibur in not Godvar, Zorog. We do have a Mawile, which says when you bench it, you can discard a special energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Honestly, not the worst ability to have in the world, but most special energy decks right now, they just play like a ton of special energy and wave accelerating it, so that's a Sparkle or Lugia Archops, so unfortunately I don't think Mawile is super great. We have a Probopass, which I got it wrong, it wasn't Nose Pass, or what was the other one, Metapass or something? Yeah, Probopass, nothing too great. Then we have the Ponyard, which is pretty bad, Bishop, which is whatever, because we now have King Gambit as part of the evolution line. So it has the attack Execute, which if your opponent's active has 4 more damage counters on it, it's knocked out, which is kind of fun. We can get some like interesting abilities involved here. There's like a Starmie from 151, but that's a stage 1, so yeah, this card's going to be very awkward to make work, but it will make for, some fun stage 2 decks. At least there's like several fun single prizes in the set. It's not just all banned plaid cards, which has happened in the past, to be honest. Like what was that set? Triple B or something was pretty bland, but at least the set's kind of cool in that sense. Then we have the Virium line. Rivaroom EX isn't super great. I've definitely talked about this card multiple times before as well, but the ability Tune Up allows you to have 4 tools attached to it, and then Wild Drift is 170. Now, you could power this up with like Gita, which we'll look at later on in the video, and then has like Diancie, I guess, to wall out. So there is some cool ways of powering this guy up. It's just not a super great card in my opinion. And I know that's like not really a popular opinion regarding Rivaroom EX. I've seen a lot of people really like this card, but honestly, these kind of abilities just don't really scream great to me because you just need so many tools as well as getting set up. So it just seems kind of bad. Then we see the only dragon type revealed in this set. So that's just going to be Altaria. I wonder if this means we'll just get one dragon a set until we get like a dragon focus set, I guess. But yeah, Altaria, 110 damage, and they're now asleep, and they have to flip 2 coins instead of 1. We've seen this kind of effect before. Not super great, but at least there is the Altaria as well from, I believe it's Evolving Skies. So there's that kind of synergy, which is alright, but not really. Same time, still kind of cool to have 2 different options. Maybe we'll get an Altaria EX. Got a Pidgeline. Now, this Pidgeot has been like a big talking point for a lot of people. Quick Search is, of course, an amazing ability, but unfortunately, this card isn't like super great because it is a stage 2 and the mid evolutions kind of add nothing. So it's a bit topsy-turvy. I don't know how to feel about this card, honestly. I think it could be pretty strong in like a Baxcalibur deck or maybe an Arceus deck, as someone suggested. I think that was also 10 types. So, there is some decent options for this. I just don't see people wanting to try and squeeze in a Pidgeot line into their deck. Now, this could win games, of course. This ability is very, very strong. It's just tutoring out anything that you want, but at the same time, it is a stage 2. It will have to get set up, so yeah, not wild about Pidgeot EX, but I can see it having some great applications somewhere down the line. Kangaskhan, that's just bad. I don't know why I bother reading these. Eevee, again, kind of bad. Zigzagoon is whatever. Lanoon is just another bad Pokemon. Swablu, also bad. Yep, we can just bullet through these. Bunnelby, pretty bad. Yeah, no, pretty bad. I thought it was interesting for some reason. We do have a Lechonk, which, is it just me, or does this look like Rainbow Road for some reason? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, we have this like really trippy Lechonk, which is kind of cool. It's always nice to see more Lechonks, of course. But that's kind of it, really. We do have a Oinkologne, which for 3 coins for each heads, you can just pick up a card from your discard pile, which is nice. Definitely nice in control decks. We have a Flamigo that does 60, and then if you have another Flamigo, 60 Snipe. Kind of cool in a spread deck, maybe, if you can have the bench space for it, but honestly, I don't think this card is super crazy. You know, maybe with Vespiquen, this is like what you need to spread the damage, but honestly, yeah, actually, maybe Vespiquen is where this could find a home in, but don't think this Flamigo is super strong otherwise. Letter of Encouragement, if someone was knocked out, you can search your deck for 3 basic energy. Kind of like a Baxcalibur or a Dugong card, but really nothing more than that. I don't think this card is super great. It's alright because you can find it with Arita and Arven, but again, nothing great. Patrol Cap prevents abilities, item cards, tools, supporters, all the rest of it from basically milling your deck. Yeah, so cards in your deck can't be discarded by the effects of your opponent's attacks, abilities, item cards, tools, support, and support. Basically, anything that your opponent does, they can't, influence the top cards of your deck. And mill really isn't that strong right now, so it's a bit of a strange card to be printed. Maybe they've got something in mind later down the line that's like really strong with mill cards, but bit of a Chi-Yu counter, but no one plays Chi-Yu, so yeah, Patrol Cap's a bit of a weird choice, honestly, but it's nice to see because it means that, low-powered items and tool cards can always be played in stuff like the Chunk League, GLC, all the rest of it, so I'm glad to see it. Revenge Punch is kind of cool, but also 4 damage counters isn't a lot, so I don't have like a ton of faith in Revenge Punch being great. Gita is kind of cool, but it's only really good on the first turn because you have to forfeit your ability to attack, which kind of sucks. But honestly, accelerating some energy is often nice, so maybe with Luminion this is kind of cool, but again, you don't want to put Luminion into play unless you can remove it, so yeah. I'm not sure about Gita, to be honest. Maybe with like Kyra and Luminion, where you can actually attack with Luminion, but yeah, I don't think Gita's super great. Maybe with Reverum and Deontay, that's like the coolest application I can think for this card, really, but right now I don't think Gita is that strong. Ortega is, I mean, it's just whatever. Like, I don't think this is a great card. It's kind of cool in control decks, but I don't think Ortega or Jenna over here is super great. We've got Poppy to move 2 energy from your Pokemon to another. I mean, I don't care. It's just not a great card. I mean, well, no. Poppy is okay. It's not like the worst card ever, but I don't think it's super great. Like, there will be some weird applications for this, I'm sure, but yeah, nothing too crazy as of right now. Rhyme, draw 3 cards, and then switch out your opponent's active to the bench, but your opponent switches it, so it's not like boss's orders plus draw 3, which would have been wild, but yeah, draw 3 cards, your opponent switches out. It's a bit annoying, could be nice in control decks, it's a one-off, but again, nothing too crazy. And then the last 2 cards were the stadiums. So Town Department Store, which is basically a tutor for a tool, so you could use this with the upcoming Electrode, or maybe with the Reverum EX, which is kind of nice. But, nothing too crazy. Maybe a nice one of Engolver, actually, which is kind of cool. Pokemon League HQ, attack cost of basics is 1 colors more. I've seen some people like rave about this card, how it like destroy Lost Zone and everything. I personally don't think this card is broken, but I do think it's good enough to be wary of. It's the kind of card that forces people to be careful about what deck they take to a tournament, so I do kind of like it in that sense. Is it super great? Probably not, but it is kind of cool. So yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on this set, guys. Spin Out Power, a bit of a long video, of course, but do let me know what you think down below. And yeah, Spin Out Power, and thank you for watching.